The track Californication is a great opportunity for us to take a look at how Chad applies ghost notes to grooves. The basic groove itself is a simple eighth note pattern if you take the ghost notes away. And it sounds like this in essence. However, with the ghost notes added, it starts to imply some 16th note movement as well. So here it is with the ghost notes added, and then we'll take a look at how we can start to develop this difference in dynamics that you need for the ghost notes. Let's take a very simple eighth note time pattern. We're just going to put the bass drum on 1 and 3 and the snare on 2 and 4. And we're going to try filling in the 16th note spaces between the 8th notes on the hi-hat. And so I'll start with the basic pattern, then I'll add a few of those ghost notes. The problem we have there is that then if we want to add a ghost note straight after the snare drum, you've got to have the technique required to play the loud backbeat and then the quiet note immediately after, as Chad does on the track. So to do that, you need to stop the stick immediately after you've played the accent, ready for the quiet ghosted note afterwards, like this. So let's hear that part just on its own, combined with the basic pattern. So it almost gives an echo sort of effect after the snare drum. It really isn't going to be as effective if you don't have this big difference in dynamics between the accented notes and the unaccented notes. So let's try adding that extra note we've added after 2 and 4 with the other 2 notes that we had in there before. So that will sound like this. Now for a great ghost note exercise, we could also try putting the ghost note before beats 2 and 4. And although Chad doesn't actually do this on the track, it's a great technique building exercise for applying ghost notes to grooves. So the note I'm talking about is going to be the last 16th note of beats 1 and 3. So that within the groove itself would sound like this. So this requires the opposite technique to what we had before. This is the quiet note into the accented note. So the way you could approach this would be to play the quiet note as an up stroke into the accent. So here's that a little quicker. Now if we add that note to the notes we had previously, we should be playing all of the 16th notes in the bar now. So the right hand is playing all of the 8th notes, the left hand is playing, along with 2 and 4, all of the upbeat 16th notes, all the E's and the R's. So in other words, if we take the accents out, the hands are just playing this. As I mentioned earlier, it's just not going to sound as effective if you've not got that contrast with the dynamics. For example, if those ghost notes get louder, it just becomes a bit of a mess and just doesn't feel like a groove. So the actual groove on the track sounds like this. So what we've got on the end of that bar, on the last 16th note, is a drag, where we're playing two lightly played notes very close together. If you didn't necessarily want the two notes as accurate as that, you could play them as a buzz. And that would sound like this. And we could use that buzz approach to most of the other ghost notes we've played in that groove as well. So obviously on the track it's just the last 16th note, but you could really place them wherever you wanted within that pattern. So with those two techniques, the ghost notes and the drags, you've got the groove that's on the track. As we move out of the verse into the chorus, move the right hand over to the ride cymbal, playing a similar figure with the left hand in terms of adding some 16th notes to the pattern. The kick drum pattern, though, stays the same. You'll notice now, though, these left-hand notes that we've added on the snare are a lot louder than the ghost notes in the verse. Midway through that pre-chorus section, there are two crashes on the cymbals, playing the last 16th note of one bar and the downbeat of the next bar. Now you're going to need to play these using both hands, and so you need to play the last 16th note of the previous bar with your left hand on the crash cymbal like this. The chorus itself finishes on an upbeat 8th note, so with an anticipation. And this is done with, by playing 3 crashes in a row, finishing on the and of beat 4. So here's the final bar of the chorus. At the end of the final pre-chorus, before the last chorus, there's a double stop fill played between the floor tom and the snare drum, where we're essentially playing all of the 16th notes of beats 3 and 4. In other words, 1, 2, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. And this is where some strong single strokes can come in handy, because in order to play these with some strength, you're going to need some single stroke chops, really. So let me show you the fill itself, and we'll look at a single stroke exercise you could try to develop this fill a little further. So figures like that, where you've played the same thing in both hands simultaneously. As I say, some good, strong single strokes can help. So just practicing evenly emphasized single strokes. Press through 16th notes. So here's a quarter note. Play 16th notes on the snare. It's surprising how uneven some people's single stroke roll can be. So do make sure that you're playing both hands as even as possible and the same stick height. And it's also worth practicing those single stroke rolls leading with your weaker hand as well. And we can play some different combinations of those kinds of double stop ideas that we've got there, perhaps incorporating the bass drum as well, just to expand this kind of idea a little bit. For example, instead of playing all the 16th notes on each beat, you could add the bass drum on the last note. You could also play groups of 3, so 2 with the hands, 1 on the bass drum. As we approach the end of the last chorus, chat those in this little variation within the groove with a bit more 16th note action on the bass drum. I'll just play it slowly for you at first. Well, that just about wraps up all the parts for Californication. But for more funky grooves like that last example, check out the playing techniques and exercises section.